Welcome to The Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore. It is Friday, October the 9th, 2020.
Democracy's on the ballot. Make no mistake about it, Susan. The American economy, the American comeback is on the ballot with 4 more years of growth and opportunity, 4 more years of President Donald Trump. 2021 is going to be the biggest economic year in the history of this country.
Thank you, Vice President Pence. Senator Harris?
Well, I mean, I thought we saw enough of it in last week's debate, but I think this is supposed to be a debate based on fact and truth. And the truth and the fact is Joe Biden has been very clear. He will not raise taxes on anybody who makes less than $400,000 a year.
He said he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking.
Nia, President Trump called into Fox Business for nearly an hour earlier today. Among his remarks, he called Senator Kamala Harris, the vice presidential nominee on the Democratic side, calling her a monster, calling her unlikable. The president has serious problems with women voters right now. I don't know that that's the wisest approach, to call a woman politician a monster and unlikable. What do you think?
It is not the wisest approach. It's terrible. Listen, he is doing terribly among women of all races. We tend to focus on white women, but you think about older women, older white women, African-American women, and so this won't help him. He doesn't seem to have any real strategy. He's kind of doubling down on all of the things we know about this president, and that is to traffic in sexist rhetoric, racist rhetoric as well. And you have, I think, those two things converging in what he is talking about and claiming about Kamala Harris. I thought Kamala Harris was fairly good last night, and I'm sure he watched that, and I'm sure he's a bit threatened by Kamala Harris. He clearly does go after women, but he particularly goes after women that he feels sort of threatened by, and I think that's what's going on here. And listen, it won't help him with women. He's bleeding support among women. Many of the women who voted for him, particularly white women in 2016, are fleeing that party. And so I think you'll see more of that with these comments. But again, this is the president we've come to know, particularly when it comes to women of color.
13 members of 2 militia groups who were preparing to kidnap and possibly kill me. When I put my hand on the Bible and took the oath of office 22 months ago, I knew this job would be hard. But I'll be honest, I never could have imagined anything like this.
The audio you heard there, first of all, from Wednesday, the interruptions by Mike Pence of moderator Susan Page and of Senator Kamala Harris, his debate opponent. Nia Malika Henderson, the journalist and political commentator on the Misogynoir of Donald Trump in his attacks against Senator Harris, and Governor Whitmer of Michigan talking about the plot to kidnap and kill her by these armed racist white thugs in Michigan. On this episode of The Politicrat, Misogynoir and misogyny, and the big picture of that, which is not being covered at all in the corporate news media, or quite frankly, much of anywhere else. All of that is coming up next.
This year's election is going to be a little different.
Instead of one election day, we now have a voting season.
That special time of year when polls can open weeks before election day.
When your mailbox can become a voting booth.
When how you vote is just as important as who you vote for.
And how, when, and where to cast your ballot depends on your state.
'Tis the season to be prepared.
This year, plan your vote.
Welcome back. We are 25 voting days away from November 3rd, the final day to vote, as we conclude the election season on that date. But please, do not wait until November 3rd to vote. Over 6 million people in the United States have voted already. and they are doing so in record numbers. I would strongly advise you to join them. Please join them if you have not yet voted. Early voting is happening in 33 or 34 states right now. And if you are in a state that is currently early voting and you have not yet voted, please do so right now, today. More states will be getting on board in literally the next few days, within the next week. So I hope that you are a part of that. And when you do early vote, make sure you wear your I voted sticker. And wear it every day to remind people that they must vote. This election is so important, and that is a real understatement, to say the very least. And as I always say, ignore the polls. Get out there and vote. And tell your friends and family to do so as well. Check your voter registration. Make sure that you are aware of the voting laws and the rules in your state. And consult iwillvote.com, or certainly you can consult the guide that I've put together, which is a pinned tweet on my Twitter account, at the popcorn, REEL. And one other thing. More colors have been added to the Politicrat Vote Early t-shirt color collection. Make sure that you remind people when you walk the streets that it is time to vote early, and do so now. And you can really get a lot of attention with these very colorful shirts that I have added to the Politicrat t-shirt Vote Early collection. The color collection will feature and has featured colors that are eye-popping, and there are more. So please make sure that you go online and shop at the Politicrat online store for the t-shirts, for the Vote Early t-shirts that have come in. New ones have come in, and they are featured as part of this color collection. New colors, including coral, including pink, to say many more. New colors right now at the Politicrat online store for the Vote Early t-shirt color collection. Visit the-politicrat.myshopify.com. There is also a link to the online site in the liner notes for this episode. Thank you very much for your support. It is Friday, and this episode today is going to be about misogyny and misogynoir, because I don't think that this is, it's not that I don't, I know this is not getting covered the way it should be. And what the corporate news media has done over the last few hours, in the last 24 hours, is constantly replayed Donald Trump on the telephone saying these things. And I thought, rather than play him saying it, I thought it better to contextualize, or at least put this in a frame where people are talking about it rather than us hearing him. Although some may say, well, it's important for people to actually hear him say it. Well, we've heard him say this for 50 years about black women. And we know that he has maximum contempt for black women. It's been baked into 50 years of his bigotry and racism and misogyny. We know he hates women in general, black, white, brown, Asian, Native. And I felt that it'd be better to play Jake Tapper or someone like that saying it. You know, it's another male, a white male saying it. But I mean this during the context of a conversation that was being had on Jake Tapper's show yesterday, with Nia Malika Henderson and Abby Phillip, both of CNN, both of them regular contributors to that program, to that network. And so it was just good to see two black women talking about this, and Jake Tapper putting the issue on the table, which I think was a better way to deal with this. But everybody's replaying that comment over and over, the comments he made against the attacks he made on Senator Kamala Harris. And we know. And we know this very well, that he has said these things about black women, whether it be Representative Maxine Waters, whether it be Omarosa Manigault, whether it be Condoleezza Rice years ago, whether it be Jamel Hill, anybody else. He said anybody, and now Senator Harris and many others. He has said these racist and misogynist things about black women. And there's just no question about it that this is Donald Trump being afraid of women who stand up for themselves. But make no mistake, it's him being a racist and him being misogynist. And his racism and misogyny are something that we have been aware of for 50 years. And many people have only just been aware of these last 4 or 5 years. That is the thing that is not being talked about, the misogyny and the misogynoir that you are hearing. And it happened on Wednesday night as well with Mike Pence, who constantly interrupted no fewer than 16 different times Senator Kamala Harris. It was frequent interruption, I should say. But interruption nonetheless. 16 different times Mike Pence interrupted Senator Kamala Harris. There was barely a measure of respect. When you interrupt somebody on the debate stage 16 times or 100 and some odd times like Donald Trump did to Joe Biden. But when you interrupt a debater 16 different times, not only are you disrespectful and rude, but you are also somebody who has no regard or respect for the person that you are interrupting or debating. Mike Pence did this also with Susan Page. Disregarded her, disregarded the rules, disregarded the protocol. This is wretched. This misogyny and this misogynoir is wretched. And it's got to end. And men in particular have got to stand up against this. And where they see it, say something. All of us have to stand up against this. When you hear a black woman being attacked like this, or in any kind of way, you have to stand up and be counted and speak up. We have seen this so often, too often. And it cannot just be something that we just wave off. And I found it very, very telling that there was an absence of that overall conversation. There were some exceptions. Caroline Randall Williams was on The Last Word talking about the misogynoir and talking also about how white women play a role in enabling and being active participants in the misogynoir and misogyny against black women. There is no question about that. And my own opinion, to piggyback off of Caroline Randall Williams, is to add that definitely at that debate on Wednesday, Susan Page, the moderator, the white female moderator who is at the Washington Bureau of the USA Today, participated in a tag team exercise at times with Mike Pence. I thought that was readily apparent. And as I said to you just yesterday, I told you that Susan Page was being tougher against Senator Harris than she was against Mike Pence. And Mike Pence was the one that was breaking the rules and constantly interrupting. So that's a real issue. And that there are white women who throughout time have enabled this behavior, this racism against black women, the misogynoir, and the misogyny against black women. And that is exactly what you saw in moments during that debate. And I alluded to it just yesterday. I also alluded to the challenges that Senator Harris had to face during that debate, and that any black woman in that position would have to face. That talking to a racist country and talking to millions of people at home, a swath of whom are racist people, whether latently racist or blatantly racist, offers these challenges in a society and a world where the racist stereotypes against black women are baked into the system. They are the system. All of these stereotypes that Senator Harris is confronting when she steps onto that debate stage, those baked in systemic stereotypes of racist stereotypes against black women, they are peppered and dotted around her even as she walks onto that stage. And so, as I said in yesterday's episode, there is a very delicate balancing act, if you will, that Senator Harris had to do. She can go in and bore in on and be tough on Mike Pence as she was. She was definitely doing that well. I thought that was excellent. But there was only so far, I think, that she could really go, because again, and it makes me angry, it makes me sad, but I'm not naive. For decades and centuries, black women have had to face this. And this was one of the, this is a historic debate 2 nights ago. And while some people on Twitter, some white males on Twitter who are prominent may have said and tweeted things like, well, this thing will be forgotten by Friday or Saturday. Look, this is not a debate I'm ever going to forget. It. First of all, it's an historical debate because it's the first one that featured a black woman as a vice presidential candidate debating on, quite frankly, a global stage. So how are you going to forget that? No, I'm not going to forget the debate, because not only was history made, but Senator Harris did a damn good job defying the kinds of expectations I'm sure that a lot of people, a lot of white people, or some white people put on her. And she obliterated any of this nonsense. And not only did she obliterate it, she, on her own terms, exemplified the kind of performance that any candidate should follow. And she was very, very good and could have been tougher. And I said yesterday that the reason why perhaps she pulled a couple of punches and could have absolutely hammered Pence, especially on this coronavirus, and she did, what she did was strong enough and very good. But there are opportunities she completely missed. And on the one hand, yes, you're in a debate situation. As I said yesterday, the hot lights come on and boom, there you go. You're on. And so all of these things are flooding through you, perhaps, no matter how well prepared you are. You've got to prepare for the interruptions. And there were, as I said, 16 of them from Mike Pence. But she could have landed some real sledgehammers. And I think part of the reason, aside from having all the other things that you might have in your mind to get across to the American public. Part of the reason why I don't think those other blows landed, because she didn't throw them to begin with, is because I think it was her reining herself in a little bit and dialing back. It's even sad because even me, as a man, as a male, saying that she has to dial it back, it's not because I want her to, but me even saying that kind of, I think, gives some kind of credence to it, as if she has to, as a woman, dial anything back. She does not. Most certainly she does not. And I'm certainly not saying that I wanted her to dial anything back. What I am saying is that white society feels that way about black women and still feels that way at large about black women. And this is the real truth, is that in white society, there are, I think, for the white people who feel this way, a certain sense of, well, this is a space that you black women are not supposed to traverse in. You cannot be in this space. And that's reflected in the interruptions of Mike Pence. That is, quite frankly, reflected in the behavior of Susan Page, the interruptions that she put forth. And frankly, I think that that is reflective in the way black women are covered around this issue and others. And it was good that Caroline Randall Williams did talk about this last night. But I think that having it pinned on the end of a show, Lawrence O'Donnell, I don't think is really the best. I'm glad you talked about it and glad you had Caroline Randall Williams on. But to have her on with 4 minutes left in a show is kind of like a throwaway, isn't it? What I think you should do is put her on in the first block. What if we reordered our priorities? What if we, and I shouldn't say we, but what if the corporate news media reordered its priorities around the way that black women are covered and depicted? What if the corporate news media went with the story of Kamala Harris, and it was front and center, but what if that was top of mind in these broadcasts the day after? It may have been for a couple of hours early in the morning, in the early morning hours, but by the time you got to, 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning, it was pretty much not the top story anymore, because I'm sure it was something that Donald Trump said or did that the media just loves to run to. And I think you should be dialing down coverage on the distractor and COVID spreader in chief and start ramping up coverage on black women, Joe Biden's campaign. Hello, can we give that a bit more oxygen, please? And also on the voter issues and the things that are going on throughout the country with voting. That needs to get a bit more attention as well, since we are 25 days away from the end of this election season. So black women must be treated with respect, and not just respect, they must absolutely be treated with the same kind of humanity that we see a lot of, quite frankly, white men and some white women treated with when it comes to dealing with the media, when it comes to discourse. And we've seen this. I mean, I'm telling you, this is something that the news media has to be better on. Put black women front and center in these broadcasts. Please, I mean, do not leave them to the end of the show to talk about these very important issues. Susan Page absolutely was an enabler on that stage on Wednesday night. And while Mike Pence was certainly disrespecting her, She certainly did not have any compunction. She didn't lack any compunction at all when it came to interrupting Senator Harris to tell her she only had 30 seconds or 15 seconds, while she profusely thanked Mike Pence as he continued to interrupt. I mean, this is just talk about enabling. And, white women, not every single one of them, but again, there is the rich, long-ass history of white women who do this, who enable white men to destroy, disrespect, and, quite frankly, kill black women. That has gone on throughout American history. That is not something that I'm saying for the first time in 2020, like it's some kind of revelation. We've seen this through enslavement in this country. We've seen it in politics in this country. We've seen it in all manner of places where white women enable the trampling of black women. We've seen this 100 years ago in the suffrage movement. That's why I'm telling you, most black women are not celebrating 100 years of emancipation, of voting, 100 years of getting the right to vote. When it was white women in these suffrage movements who were ostracizing black women and exemplifying the most racist behaviors and sentiments against black women. These are white women in the suffrage movement doing this, even as black women in that very same movement were fighting for the very same things. But because of the virulent racism of white women in the suffrage movement back in the 1920s and before 1920, I should say, because of that racism that they exhibited against black women had to wait another 45 years before they could secure the right to vote in this country. Malcolm X once said that the most disrespected woman is the black woman. He wasn't wrong. By the way, I am mindful of the fact that even as I admonish the corporate news media and entreat upon them the necessity of putting black women front and center and not at the end of their television programs, I am mindful of the fact that there is the black press out here, and I have not forgotten that. So if you find that the corporate news media continues, as it most likely will and has, to marginalize black women and on very few occasions provide them the fora to calibrate and be involved in the discussions. And granted, there are networks like MSNBC who have done a whole lot better than many others to facilitate this. And CNN has to an extent as well, cannot fail to mention that. But in general terms, across the corporate news media, be it in a local level or be it in the news, broadcast news, if you continue to see this, please make sure that you make the black press a daily staple of your life. Roland Martin, on a daily basis, Monday through Friday, provides 2 hours of programming per day to speak to issues and about issues pertaining to and important to the black community all across the United States. He has on black men and women from whom to gain expertise from, people from across disciplines, science, medicine, the economic field, legal field, entertainment, sports, music, politics, broadcasting, you name it, everyone. There are many black women on his show on a daily basis that you will hear from. So I must shout out Roland Martin, and you can find him at rolandsmartin.com/unfiltered for his daily show, Roland Martin Unfiltered. He is also on Twitter at Roland S. Martin. You can also find Karen Hunter on Twitter, KarenHunt, Karen Hunter. She has a show on Sirius XM Urban View, channel 126, Monday through Friday, from midday Pacific to 3 p.m., I believe it is Pacific. I'm not 100% sure on the time, but I believe that is the time of her show. But you can find her on Twitter at Karen Hunter. You can also find Joe Madison, the Black Eagle, on Twitter at Madison Sirius XM. That's Madison SIRIUS XM. He has a show daily for 4 hours, 6 a.m. Eastern to 10 a.m. Eastern. It's called Joe Madison, the Black Eagle. It's on Sirius XM Radio, channel 126, part of the Urban View. Make sure you listen to the Urban View Network on Sirius XM. Most of the time you will get, well, pretty much all the time you will get excellent guests and excellent hosts like Laura Coates, you know her, the former federal prosecutor. Clay Kane, also a host. Reverend Sharpton, a host. Joe Madison, a host. And so many others. Karen Hunter. So there is the black press, and I must stress that. The black press is where you really ultimately need to go and have to go. If you want balanced, not only just balanced, but news about the black community and analysis of things like what I am analyzing right now, dealing with the Misogynoir and having black people talk about that amongst themselves. So I just thought that I'd spend a few minutes mentioning that as well.
The thing that really drove me insane last night was when Susan Page would just keep saying, "Thank you, Mike Pence. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you." And I just kept wondering, why on earth are you thanking this man for breaking the rules instead of demanding that he behave appropriately? And then, when it was Kamala's turn, she'd say, "Thank you, Senator Harris." And then she'd sort of connect with Kamala. She'd try and make eye contact, like, "It's just us girls. Why don't you follow the rules? Because this boy is being dumb." And I thought, that is not how we play this game, not in this moment, not when white women have been taking so much away from black women throughout history, and when actually we're both trying to figure out how to get rid of this toxic neoconservative masculinity that we're all having to witness.
2021 is going to be the biggest economic year in the history of this country.
Thank you, Vice President Pence. Senator Harris?
Well, I mean, I thought we saw enough of it in last week's debate, but I think this is supposed to be a debate based on fact and truth. And the truth and the fact is Joe Biden has been very clear. He will not raise taxes on anybody who makes less than $400,000 a year.
He said he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
Well,
I'm speaking.
It'd be important if you said the truth. Joe Biden said twice in the debate last week that he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts. That was tax cuts that gave the average working family $2,000 in a tax break every single year. Senator,
that is absolutely not true.
Is he only going to repeal part of the Trump tax cuts?
If you don't mind letting me finish, we can then have a conversation, okay?
Please.
Okay. Joe Biden will not raise taxes on anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden will not end fracking. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden is the one who, during the Great Recession, was responsible for the Recovery Act that brought America back. And now the Trump-Pence administration wants to take credit when they rode the coattails of Joe Biden's success for the economy that they had at the beginning of their term. Of course, now the economy is a complete disaster. But Joe Biden, on the one hand, did that. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who has reigned over a recession that is being compared to the Great Depression. On the one hand, you have Joe Biden, who was responsible with President Barack Obama for the Affordable Care Act, which brought health care to over 20 million Americans and protected people with pre-existing conditions. And what it also did is it saved those families who otherwise were going bankrupt because of hospital bills they could not afford. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who's in court right now, trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, which means that you will lose protections if you have pre-existing conditions. And this is very important, Susan.
Yes,
and it's
important.
But
we need to give Vice President.
I'd just like to, he interrupted me, and I'd like to just finish, please. If you have a pre-existing condition, heart disease, diabetes, breast cancer, they're coming for you. If you love someone who has a pre-existing condition, they're coming for you. If you are under the age of 26 on your parents' coverage, they're coming for you.
Senator Harris, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let me give you a chance to respond.
That was one of many examples of Kamala Harris being interrupted and sidelined by both Mike Pence and Susan Page. It was a tag team, and this is just ridiculous. Susan Page did a horrible job moderating that debate. Let's really be honest about that. Never mind the fact that Mike Pence was being very rude and chauvinistic in his behavior. I mean, not outwardly chauvinistic, but the male way, right, is to interrupt, and particularly to interrupt women. So in that way, he is being, I would say, chauvinistic, as well as downright rude and disrespectful of the moderator, who then in turn, because I think she has internalized the patriarchy, as we all have to a degree, she in turn then inflicts that upon Senator Harris. You just heard the example of it right there. You just heard the example of it. Senator Harris was given 2 minutes to speak. Mike Pence interrupts that 2 minutes and then speaks for at least a minute of her time. And then when Senator Harris says twice, look, I'm speaking, then Susan Page comes in as Senator Harris is trying to finish her thought and says, oh, no, we've got to let Mike Pence have a chance to respond. Excuse me? Have you lost your mind, Susan? Why are you offering, we've got to let him have a chance to respond when he has already interrupted Senator Harris for at least a minute of her time? And by the way, did you also notice when you listened to that clip, as you listened to it, that not once did Susan Page say, Mr. Vice President, please, it's now Senator Harris's turn. She's speaking. Let her speak. Did you notice that? You didn't hear any interruption by the moderator, Susan Page? But then when Senator Harris is trying to finish her thought, we've got to let Vice President Pence speak. Oh, please. I mean, at least Chris Wallace, for goodness sake, at least he said it's now the Vice President Biden's time to speak. At least he said that, and he was a terrible moderator last week. At least he did that. But Susan Page was an absolute disaster. I mean, Wallace was a disaster too, but at least there were moments where he put his foot down and said, look, I'm the moderator here, and this is how it's going to go. And it's now my Vice President Biden's turn to speak. And I know there's, again, I talk about the gender issue and the patriarchy and the misogyny and the sexism. I get it. But Susan Page, I'm sorry, is in a position of power at that moderator's desk. Whether there's a white man sitting across from her or not. And you are a moderator, not an appeaser. You are a moderator, not an enabler. But for too long and too often throughout the history of this country, and I'm going to get into it some more, white women have enabled white men against black women. And against black men too, but particularly against black women. This has been going on for hundreds of years. And it doesn't matter how blatant or how subtle, it is still going on today. And you heard it in that clip that I just played for you. It's got to stop. And to the Commission on Presidential Debates, get better moderators. Welcome back. We must have a culture that respects black women. I mean, there is no other way around it. We've seen the misogyny go on and on and on. We've seen the misogynoir go on and on and on. We have seen this with AOC, who, of course, is a Latina, and the way that she has been disrespected. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has been disrespected and, quite frankly, sexualized by the white male Republicans. And I'm not just talking about politicians. I'm talking about people in political consultant offices. I'm talking about people who are staff or aides to Mitch McConnell or supporters of his. There, of course, was reporting done last year or the year before about misogynistic things that were depicting AOC in these grotesque positions. I'm not even, you know what I'm talking about. And, this evil rape culture that we have in this country and that we have all over the world. And there were these memes around that were really disgusting, as well as the actual things that were going on. And this whole culture, which is so toxic and destructive. And this is this toxic masculinity and this patriarchy. This is where all of this is. And anyone who genuflects to that patriarchy is part of the problem. Just like Susan Page did the other night. Just like you see with all of these men putting up these sexist and misogynist tropes and racist tropes against Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. This is something in this culture in this country that we must eradicate. We really must. And Donald Trump is part of that issue and part of that problem. But he is not the only one, and he's certainly not the starter of this.
She addressed it to the 8th grade girl because she is looking to the future. Mike Pence, all he can do is look backward and attract flies. Kamala Harris is a former prosecutor. She knows the best of what this country can be, even within the parameters of its rules. She is the dream. That's why she confuses them. She's this woman who embodies, the best parts of American ideals made manifest to their fullest, most complete extent. She is serious, she's free, she's judicious, she's disciplined, and she's forward-looking. And I think that was the part of that struck me the most, because Mike Pence was sort of this nostalgic gesture toward an across-the-aisle America that just meant that there were old white guys on both sides of the aisle. A Biden-Harris ticket is going to be one that, if they figure out how to navigate across-the-aisle politics again, it's going to be one where we're both actually seeing each other and working towards some sort of common truth. And that's one of my biggest hopes for the potential of their partnership in the White House.
I think the words of Carolyn Randall Williams are very apt. Plus, there is a Washington Post column about this as well, about misogynoir and about the way white women enable it at the expense of black women. I will post a link to that Washington Post article in the liner notes of this episode, so please be sure to click on the link. So you have Mike Pence disrespecting women, specifically Susan Page and Senator Kamala Harris. And you have Donald Trump doing what he's been doing for 50 years when it comes to women, disrespecting them and saying these vile, misogynistic and racist things about them. With his attacks on Senator Harris yesterday. Now, it's not the first time that he's attacked Senator Harris. And again, this through line that happens. And then what happened with Governor Whitmer and what we saw with the attacks on her, the death threats. We saw that earlier this year. Female governor, Michigan. And we've seen this with Donald Trump saying things about her. We've seen this with these racist, white, violent thugs who call themselves men, walking the streets in Lansing, storming the state capitol with nooses and swastikas and Confederate battle flags and Trump flags and guns. They were armed to the gills. They invaded the state legislature with their weapons. That's a law that's got to go. That law has got to go. And I know the legislature is controlled by Republicans, but there's got to be a way that voters get to the polls in Michigan and vote these Republican clowns out. Because they're clearly not going to change that law. And the only way it's going to be changed to get rid of open carry inside state houses is to get rid of these Republicans at the ballot box. You know that you can't bring political signs inside the state capitol building, but you can open carry your gun inside the Michigan state capitol building. I mean, that shows you how insane and backwards this country is in some respects. In many respects. How on earth can you not carry a piece of signage for your candidate or for a view that you have, but you can carry an automatic weapon, open freaking carry inside the State House in Michigan? What could possibly go wrong? And then we find out that these racist, violent white men, these gangs of white men, these thugs, had a plot or conspired, allegedly, to kidnap, if not murder. Kidnapping is horrible enough, but murder Governor Whitmer. And this is an absolute disgrace. And where were the Republicans standing up and condemning this situation? Nowhere. Of course, you had Donald Trump reiterating in his mind that, oh, Gretchen Whitmer, she's terrible. That woman, oh, she's terrible. Oh, she's not doing the job. Open this. You got to get rid of this guy in the White House. There is no two ways about it. And don't get me wrong. This guy is absolutely inciting these groups. There's nothing to get wrong. It's clear he did it at the debate last week with Joe Biden when he refused to call out racists and thugs and actually said what he said about the Proud Boys. I'm not going to repeat it. You know what he said. He gave them an order. So, look, no one should be under any confusion. We know what he said 3 years ago with Charlottesville. We know that he had 3 or 4 different opportunities that weekend to come out and condemn the violence that took the life of Heather Heyer and condemn the racism and these white hate groups. And he didn't do it. He was very messy with it, and we know what he said. So no one should be confused at this point. Very few people are undecided in this election. And this plot to kidnap the governor of Michigan, you have to remember that back in April and in May, of this year, these same thugs, these same racist, violent, white thugs were in the state capitol, 2 of them at least, with their guns inside the legislature chamber, standing over the lawmakers from a balcony with their guns exposed. Nothing would have stopped them from firing those guns, quite frankly. Nothing would have. What would have stopped one of those guys from pulling the trigger? I mean, this is very, very dangerous. And to allow for open carry inside the state legislature in Michigan or anywhere, you're just asking for trouble. This is very dangerous and very stupid. We have an abusive relationship with guns in this country. We have an abusive relationship with misogyny. Or shall I say that we perpetrate misogyny? I mean, maybe that's the clearer way to say all of this. We perpetrate it. All of us do in some way. Well, not all of us. But every day that we don't call it out, and every day that we don't fight against it, is a day that we are complicit with it. That's just a fact. You know, that story should have got even more press than it did. That attempted kidnapping, that plot, that conspiracy plot, the alleged conspiracy plot. 13 people, 13 cowards indicted. 6 of them, 6 white men in the federal charges, and I guess 7 more in the state charges. I mean, this story would have got more coverage if it were some Antifa. Oh, Antifa has done this. Or Black Lives Matter. Well, let me tell you something. Black Lives Matter protesters are peaceful. 93 or 94% of those demonstrations that have been going on, right, and they continue, are peaceful. So please stop talking about Black Lives Matter. But this is a very serious thing that happened yesterday. And I want to thank the FBI and the locals in Michigan, the law enforcement people there, for snuffing this out. These cowardly, hateful, misogynistic, racist people, these white thugs, these violent people. I want to thank the FBI, and you won't hear me say that too much, but I have said that Chris Wray has done a very good job at the FBI. And just because I am not a big fan of the FBI doesn't mean that I can't point out when the FBI gets something right. And over the last year or two, for the most part, they've got things right, particularly when it comes to this. When it comes to the hatred, the racism, the misogyny, they have dealt with groups, these white thugs and violent thugs who are perpetuating and perpetrating these plots and are trying to overthrow the government, and calling them that other name that begins with M, and I'm not going to even say it, is just so weak. You cannot be calling these people that. Stop legitimizing violence. I guarantee you they would not have been called that if they were Black Lives Matter, which they wouldn't be. So I want to thank Dana Nessel, the Attorney General there in Michigan, and also the law enforcement folks in the state, and also the FBI for doing the job. And don't forget, and make no mistake, this is not the only plot. You know that there are others out there, folks. Come on, you think that this is the only plot that's being hatched? Look, I don't have any inside knowledge of any of this, but you don't think that these thugs, these racists, these violent white men, you don't think that they aren't planning other things? And the FBI surely knows that. The FBI knows. All of these intelligence agencies are, I'm sure they're doing reconnaissance and intelligence operations and all kinds of things that they're up to that we, the public, don't know of for obvious reasons. I mean, if you read that 15-page indictment, that 15-page letter count, 15 pages. Some of the stuff that you read is going to blow your mind with that 15 pages that you read, if you read it. And this guy leaves, the guy who does the charging document, he leaves out some things. He says that he doesn't even want to get into certain things. I mean, it's just, put it this way. What you read in that 15 pages is just a part of what these violent white thugs were plotting. There's stuff that he left out. And I'm sure obviously for intelligence reasons, but also because it was probably just so evil. As evil, if not more, far more evil than what you already seen, which is evil in what we've heard. It's just surreal to hear the governor of a state say that there was a plot to kill me. I mean, I watched that and yesterday I couldn't believe what I was watching. But that's what she said. And to say it on live national television, it shows you how serious the issues are now in this country and how this country is in a position now, and it is fascist, but how this country now is very close to slipping into that for an age, if not more. If we do not do the right thing at the ballot box, and if we don't vote for Joe Biden. I will leave it with this. I will leave you with this because there was so much misogyny in those months in April and May at that state capitol with headless Barbie dolls, with Barbies in nooses, with people calling her Hitler. How can you call a governor of a state? It's just evil. And a Democratic governor who has not always been on the right side as far as I'm concerned, but has done some good things for that state. She still has some problems in that state politically, and some of the things that, with Flint, she's been very hands off on that. I spoke to Susan Demas about this. Susan Demas would, I think, agree to an extent, but I think far more, perhaps, that Governor Whitmer has failed profoundly on Flint and the water crisis, to say the least. And the previous governor was the one that did all the damage and should be in jail right now, Rick Snyder. Yes, I'm talking to you. Republican governor, former governor of the state of Michigan, who was on Lincoln Project's conference call yesterday evening talking about, the one thing in this country that's the biggest threat is us. Yeah, you're damn right. You tell that to the people of Michigan that you poisoned with the lead in the water. So Governor Whitmer has her issues there too. But listen, I don't care what kind of issues she has there with some of the things that are going on that she has created or done or listen. And, she's definitely not 100% perfect. No, none of us is. But that does not spell that you should go and kidnap her or commit any act of violence. That is irresponsible, is dangerous, and there is no other way around it. You've got to be in prison for that after you get your trial. And Donald Trump incites this when he says in tweets, "Liberate Michigan." What do you think that means? People have got to start putting two and two together. His misogyny, his racism, and his violent tweets and lies are responsible for all of this. He has the blood of 213,000 people on his hands. And he killed those people. I've told you Donald Trump is a murderer. I've told you he's a facilitator and an inciter. And he certainly did not put any water on the flames in the aftermath of what happened with Governor Whitmer. He tripled down with more tweets attacking her And he did that last night. I will leave you with this. If you do not vote for Joe Biden, you are absolutely ushering in more fascism, more hatred, more racism, more misogyny. Your third-party vote will absolutely be enabling that and rubber stamping it. Remember, the only thing you can be doing is voting Democratic all the way down ticket. And not only that, down ballot, but not only that, the thing to remember is that a vote for anyone but Joe Biden is a vote for Donald Trump. Simple as that. There are only two choices. One of them is Donald Trump, the other is Joe Biden. And I urge you to vote Joe Biden and vote Democratic all the way down ballot. This is about America's future and about America's very existence. This isn't even about Republicans and Democrats. This is about America existing or America dying. And you do not help to deal with that issue by voting for a third party or staying at home or writing in someone's name. You have two choices. And I urge you to pick Joe Biden at the ballot box. Vote Joe Biden. And every day we must all work to eradicate misogyny and racism out of this country, out of this world. We have to. If you see something, stand up and speak out if you can. Please do. I urge you to. Make sure that your voice is heard. Make sure you vote for the future. Make sure you vote Democratic. Thank you very much for listening to this edition of The Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore.
Where Kamala Harris was continually interrupted by Mike Pence, and the moderator gave more speaking time to Mike Pence.
The vice president is the head of the task force and knew on January 28th how serious this was. And then thanks to Bob Woodward, we learned that they knew about it. And then when that was exposed, the vice president said, when asked, well, why didn't you all tell anybody? He said, because the president wanted people to remain calm.
Well, let's get
no, but Susan, this is important.
Susan,
I want to add, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
I'm
speaking.
Yeah, you can have 15 more seconds, and then we'll give the Vice President a chance to
So I want to ask the American people, how calm were you when you were panicked about where you're going to get your next roll of toilet paper? How calm were you when your kids were sent home from school and you didn't know when they could go back? How calm were you when your children couldn't see your parents because you were afraid they could kill them?